And I think that requires maturity and confidence and emotional intelligence, which is very sorely lacking in this country, right? We have a lot of technical intelligence, we have a lot of scientific intelligence, we have a lot of theological intelligence, but very little emotional intelligence. And I think the reason why we have such massive structural racial irreconciliation is because of the emotional stupidity of this nation. Black people and Native Americans have been raped, pillaged, murdered, genocide, slavery. Every treaty's been broken. Every law has been set up for white people, enforced for white people, and all that. And when but we're in the situation, we're stuck together. Our African Americans are going to go back to Africa now. I mean, we're stuck together. We're kind of in a household together. And white people are always saying to me, our denomination had this formal apology in 1997 at the General Assembly, and our bishop said this, and we released this statement, and once I made a public statement, from the pulpit. I mean, what more do you want? And I said, have you ever tried those tactics with your wife? Okay, I'm sorry, I committed adultery, and but there it is. Now. Happy now? Okay. Go fetch me my beer. I mean, the callousness with which the average white person deals with race relations. If I had committed adultery against my wife and she somehow was Christian enough, gracious enough, loving enough to forgive me and receive me as her husband for the rest of our lives together, that means there has got to be a transfiguration. For the rest of my life, my character must be marked by humility, gratitude, and grace. I can never take it for granted like that. And not because I'm scared, but because the grace that will show me is so overwhelming that will be constantly on my mind. So there has to be a change in attitude from that point on. And that's what we don't see in race relations. A kind of a recognition, first of all, that what the majority has done to the minority in this country is relationally speaking, like adultery. And whenever the Israelites are disobedient to God, God calls it adultery. It's a very personal way of describing sin. It's not like you broke something. It's you broke my heart because of your fooling around with somebody else. And there hasn't been that kind of recognition in our relations with one another. And what does it mean to be a middle-colored person? It means to, like all the immigrants before us, step on the backs of black people to enter into white privilege by telling white people we're safer minorities. Black people are menacing, they're angry, and they have a long memory and a long history, but we Asian people, we're just like you, except good in math. And, so we'll solve your problems and fix your computers and enter into, middle management, but we won't challenge your supremacy. And this has a way of reifying. So the problem with white supremacy, to me, is not white, it's a supremacy. Mm-hmm. That's the problem with maleness. It's not being male, it's the supremacy that's immediately associated with maleness, right? So it's the reifying a certain category, whether it's male or white or old or young or whatever, and then immediately associating that with supremacy. But the other problem is reifying in the negative way. Mm-hmm. Black means inferior, a woman means inferior, those with different abilities are inferior, those from different countries are inferior. So anytime we reify a certain kind of inferiority or superiority, we are not seeing the face and the image of God in one another. So it's not just supremacy that I deal with as a pastor. It's for ungodly reasons, reifying, making hard, that is, anything that is not directly of God. And so it's not me now to say, okay, I've been duped by white supremacy, and so now I'm going to stand in solidarity with black people. It's facing my white sisters and brothers and speaking honestly about what it means to be human, and the ways that I have participated in structures, mm-hmm. in relationships and conversations, in career seeking and ladder climbing that has somehow dehumanized us both in that exchange. And the same thing with African Americans. To say squarely not now to seek your approval, but to seek your forgiveness. That's a different thing. By confessing deeply, however unwittingly, for a good period of time. We've been here 45 years now, since the Immigration Reform Act of 1965. 45 years is a sufficient time for us to recognize what is going on in the history of this country and to make deep apology to one another for the ways that we have been played and the ways that we continue to be complicit. And I've heard Margaret say earlier that she's not just a native of Barbados. She is a citizen of a particular empire now that is complicit in the atrocities of empire all over the world, and so am I. And so what it means to be Christian then for me is that we don't just take on victim language as a shortcut to our own virtuous identity, but that we also take on the identity of the oppressor, because we all are too in a way, and then mutually ask for forgiveness, and then let the church be a safe environment where that kind of confession leads to genuine reconciliation.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit. I thank both of you for what you were saying, and both piggybacking on what you were talking about doing church in your own way with your own folk, and also talking about the whole question of coming to terms with the questions of supremacy. I want to raise up a conversation that happened on Twitter. And I'm raising up a conversation that happened on Twitter because that's where most of the Presbyterians I have everyday conversation with, I have it on Twitter. These are folks from all over the country. Several of them are right now gathering for Outlaw Preachers 10, whatever that is. And there are conversations about the need for community that are going on in the emergent world. They are going on in the neo-monastic world. They're going on in the world of people, adult people under the age of 40, who are having these conversations electronically. They're having it in Second Life. They're having it on Twitter. They're having it on Facebook. They're beginning to have it in terms of how they even do ministry. I was talking to Bruce Reyes-Chow about the fact that he tweets and Facebooks and emails most of his ministry contact. He doesn't do a lot of visiting because his folks aren't home. And they have their session meetings at 10 o'clock at night. That's when people can be around.